believe we've been doing this for 2 years.
I know. Can you believe that we've been doing this for 2 years? Welcome everyone back to 2026. Jo and I are back on your airwaves.
Popping up in your feed, uninvited.
Oh no, there was people who did register to the event. So no, we thank you for that. But no, welcome everyone. It's lovely to have you with us. Isn't it? Oh my goodness. Well, you drive today, Jo.
Oh my gosh, I was just thinking about something completely different then. Sorry, you caught me in a moment.
Come on, kick us off. What are we doing this year? We always reinvent ourselves.
What we're doing this year. So we are taking, as we always do, we like a little bit of a pivot and a bit of a reinvention to keep it spicy. Pardon the pun. And we were talking what we would feel like we have chewed the fat and we have talked theory, best practice and all of that really, really important stuff for the past couple of years, with focusing on talent last year, focusing on recruitment and all of that great stuff the year before. And this year we're coming at it from a different angle. It's going to be real life case study driven. And I think between us now, I'm not going to attach a number on it because it'll start to freak me out, but we've got considerable amount of years of experience doing the do under our belts. And I think it's about time we started bringing some of that work to the forefront and talking about the real work and actually spotlighting what it is we actually do for a living and talking through like live examples or stuff we've done over the last few years and taking people on a little bit of a journey as to why our clients approached us, what they were looking for, what the challenge was, what the solution was, what we went in and did, and kind of what the impact has been. And I think that will what we want to do, don't we? We want to create like a bank of case studies, not only so Sally and I can answer that question in terms of like, what have you done and what happened, and show me your case studies. I get so bored. I'm not writing case studies. I'll be like, just go to this LinkedIn series we've got. You can see all of the good stuff. So hopefully it's going to be super interesting for the audience, if not just for me and you, Sally.
Well, I think as well, and especially in my line of work in terms of the recruitment arm of the business that I run, is everyone can talk a good talk, right? When it comes to diversity and inclusion, everyone knows the why that we should be doing it. But there is a real distinction about those who talk about it and can make a good argument and those who are actually in there doing the work, and what it takes for the work to actually effectively embed and have impact. So, I kind of came to you, Jo, with like we need to switch this up a little bit, right? This isn't just like an opinion post anymore. This is around actually the work that we do with our clients, the impact it has, and also I think breaking it down even further to understand what the problem or the challenge was that they came to us with, because it's really important to understand that this work is so highly nuanced that actually every single client that we work with needs something slightly different from us, and how our kind of breadth of experience in this space, as you've mentioned, lends itself to really identifying what that challenge is and how best to attack it and to overcome it. Because we all know, and some of the backlash that our work has seen, our industry, our profession has seen, is there is no one size fits all when it comes to inclusion work. So I wanted to really use this opportunity not only to highlight the work that Jo and I does, but to really demonstrate the kind of things that you need to be thinking about as an organization to be able to identify what challenge it is that you're trying to solve, and how partnering with an external practitioner and expert like us can really help. So that's why.
Well, that was a much more polished interpretation of what we're here to do than I gave. So
it's silly.
Well,
silly. Go on, over to you again.
Isn't it, that what we thought would work really well is if we alternate it. So every time we do one of these, either myself or Sally is going to bring a different example of their work to the table. Now, one of the most important things is that we anonymize this. It kind of feels a little bit icky if we're kind of like talking about clients and using their brand and whatnot, because a lot of this stuff that we do is highly personalized and also, you know, pretty confidential and private, right? And not everybody wants, you know, their organizational business splattered all over the internet. So we're going to be highly sensitive to that, and nothing that we say or do will indicate who it is. We might even change industry, we might even change discipline, geographical location. There might be various things that we do to make sure that this stays, you know, in our brains, but we still get to share the real life examples. So hopefully
but this one, yeah, I mean, this one absolutely is anonymized, but I have kept the industry and scale and scope the same because I think that's important to the work that we've done with this particular company. Yeah.
And some of our clients will be completely up for it. You know, I've got a few case studies and examples that I want to bring in definitely from last year, and I know they're going to be completely cool with it. But that was just the kind of big small print, wasn't it? So it's your turn this month, isn't it? This week, this session.
This week, I mean, however often we do it. But yeah, so I was fortunate to work with a global engineering and professional services organization last year that operated across multiple regions. So this is where this complexity starts to come in, with very different labour markets. And they came to us because they were dealing with fluctuating hiring volumes, changing workforce planning priorities, which we're seeing a lot at the moment in terms of how organizations are approaching workforce planning and talent management. There were increasing expectations around DEI in recruitment. And this is, you know, down to, you know, leadership. It was coming from employees. It was coming from the wider market. We also need to bear in mind that although there is a lot of noise coming from the US in terms of DEI, the European markets, which is where this organization had a huge foothold, there is actually a rise in expectation around diversity and inclusion in terms of hiring practice. So, you know, inclusive recruitment was firmly on the agenda, but wasn't yet embedded as a core part of how hiring decisions were being made day to day. So that really was the kind of premise of what they came to us with. The expectation was there from lots of different stakeholder groups, but they absolutely recognised it wasn't a core part of how, you know, they're core part of their hiring, essentially.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've been having more conversations with actually with those who head up hiring manager populations on a really broad and varied geographical scale. And they've got the ethics are there, the values are there, the will to want to do this really, really well, hiring and recruitment and talent attraction strategy really, really well, and give candidates the best possible experience is absolutely embedded. But it's kind of this standardized, uniform approach that clients and prospects are wanting to kind of like implement, not from a compliance perspective, but to make sure that they've got, like, if anybody was to say, what's your decision-making process when it comes to shortlisting CVs or bringing people to interview or decision-making on hiring, you know, people in any jurisdiction, geographical location would be able to say something similar. And it's like, how do we, I think it is something that more and more folks are looking at. How do we take this joined up approach, not disempowering hiring managers, TA teams kind of globally, to, you know, to not be able to be part of the change journey and the improvement process, but just to kind of, make things better on a much broader scale. And just before I shut up, it's really interesting what you said about despite what the rhetoric is, you know, this stuff is still at the top of the list in many other parts of the world. Like you said, you mentioned the EU there. Also, talking to some of my US clients, the conversation might not be external, but it's still definitely internal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, over to you, Jo. I interrupted you then.
Yeah, no. So I was going to say. So, what was it about kind of their kind of initial brief and their overarching goal that really kind of stuck with you, struck you kind of the most, or resonated the most?
I think the first thing I wanted to mention was, we didn't have the luxury or the inclination to slow down hiring. Okay, that wasn't an option. This wasn't like a let's pause, let's redesign everything moment. They needed to maintain quality and pace whilst improving this kind of alongside. All right. And secondly, the real risk wasn't just kind of representation, which they know that they needed to address. It was inconsistency, to the point that you've just made. Okay, the candidate experience varied region by region. Recruiters were under immense pressure, as they always are, and decision making wasn't always structured or defensible as leaders assumed, essentially. So for me, this wasn't just about protecting quality, and trust in the hiring process. It was about doing that, not just around kind of ethical hiring. We had to have trust in the hiring process. We need to make sure the hiring process didn't break at all through this process, and it improved. And we had to protect the quality of the hires that were coming through as well. So, something quite complex that we had to unpick, essentially.
I keep hearing this word a lot, the word defensible, right? I haven't spoken about defensible hiring decisions over the last 5 years since I set the business up. But I think Q4 last year, this was a pain point. We need to be able to evidence defensible hiring decisions. And it wasn't coming from I call it, a backside covering lens. It was more of, we are getting more feedback. We're not only asking for more feedback from candidates on the experience, but we are getting more feedback on our processes from candidates. And it's not just a review on Glassdoor saying you were a little bit shit. It's actually something that feels like somebody's being given serious advice, or coming at it from a potential legal perspective. So I just wanted to pick up on that, like, kind of, defensible decision making. Have you got any kind of thoughts on that?
I think there is absolutely a greater expectation from candidates in terms of feedback. And I think, interestingly, I do a huge amount of work with the career coaching side of our firm, which is helping candidates to prepare for interview. And what is asked of candidates through interview processes at the moment is absolutely astonishing, okay, in terms of the hoops that they need to go through to be able to demonstrate their worth in the recruitment process. To go through that and then not receive specific and credible feedback, I think is shocking. And again, if we're talking about raising the standards, we're talking about candidate experience. And we want to think about what we would call in the industry silver medalists. So these people who come a close 2 or 3, right, to the person who gets offered the job. Number one, if you've identified someone as that good for your organization, you're going to want to keep them warm for other opportunities. You're going to want them to be in your talent pipeline. And as we all know, the recruitment market is very sticky at the moment. Lots of people accept jobs and then fall out for whatever reason. They get a counter offer where they are, they get cold feet, they have a confidence crisis in confidence, whatever. There's more reasons than not for people to not start on that first day. So it's even more important for you to keep your talent pipelines warm and engaged. So I think when we talk about defensible hiring, I think there's absolutely a compliance angle on this, Jo. And there's something that I know that we're going to talk about in a later session around the kind of new employment law changes. But I think absolutely, in addition to candidate feedback, I think those who take hiring seriously, hiring managers who want to demonstrate, competent leadership, want to make sure themselves that they're making the right decision, right? They need the framework, they need the training, they need the hiring in order to do that, because it's very easy for us to say as recruiters, oh, this is how you do it. But when someone's only doing this once every 6 months or once every quarter or once a year, it isn't a muscle that they're used to flexing. So it's important to them that they're doing it right. And it's important for them that they can defend the hiring decisions that they make.
Yeah. And at the same time, I think that we often, as recruiters, we can, and hiring managers, whatever role we take in the hiring process, we can often make assumptions about,
Mhm.
like, speaking for myself here, capability. That
Mhm.
we are kind of up to date on what we need to do, that we understand modern, progressive recruitment processes, that we, as maybe in this case of your client, that we do take a joined up approach, and that actually, we're not doing too badly, as an organization. Um, and I think, that's sometimes whenever I'm scoping out potential to work with a client, that when I'm doing my initial discovery, I find it always really interesting to look at, like, what we get through our audit and what we, in comparison to the assumptions that the business may have made about its potential pain points. In this particular case, what kind of assumptions perhaps were taking place that were maybe stopping them or preventing them from having that, fully inclusive process.
I think it's really interesting when we use the word assumption, because I think, and what I find quite a challenge in the work that we do is because these phrases become almost like kind of, second nature. Inclusive hiring, we kind of all know what that is, right? Inclusive leadership, we all kind of know what this is. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, we kind of know what that is. There is this assumption that it's actually been done within the organization. So there was absolutely an assumption that the hiring team within this firm were hiring exclusively, okay, and they were treating everyone the same, and the process was fair. There was that assumption. And so that they thought that, their diversity challenges were mainly around attraction. And when we started then to do a deep dive, we started to unpick that and understand that that was an assumption and it wasn't the truth. And I think when we then kind of audited the end-to-end recruitment process, a much more complex picture started to emerge. Because what we can say, and what the company should be really proud of, is that there was a strong level of intent. Okay, there's a strong level of intent in terms of doing the right thing. But what we found was that recruiters didn't always feel able to challenge hiring managers, especially under pressure. Okay, and there were accessibility barriers that were embedded into what the company or the firm assumed were kind of standard recruitment practices. So, I mean, we were talking before we jumped on today. We always kind of like to identify some what we call kind of low-hanging fruit, in terms of these are some really quick and simple changes that you can make that no one really even notices, but they can have quite significant impact. And that, I think, is especially when we start talking about and start looking at accessibility in recruitment processes. So, those are a couple of the assumptions that the organisation were making or had made that we would try, we're able to challenge in a really kind of non-offensive way, but help them realise some
it's not about going in and saying, oh my gosh, you're doing all of this stuff wrong, you're 5 seconds away from litigation, and panicking everybody. I don't think we ever create a psychologically safe space with our clients if they feel that we're judging them and telling them off, and this is, we're all about pushing for improvement. That's what they're paying us to do. And that might involve a few uncomfortable conversations, but it's all about how you engage, isn't it? How you present those findings. So talk me, I'm really, really interested to understand, how did it all work? What process did you actually go through with your client to really figure out maybe some gaps or disparities or assumptions that were being made? What is it that you do?
Well, I think I wanted to also just make the point that within this organisation, there was really good people, okay, really good recruiters, really good people, really good hiring managers that were operating in systems, and you will always hear me bleat on about my systems, but systems that hadn't been designed for inclusive outcomes at scale. Okay, so that was essentially what we were going in to fix. We weren't giving them.
What example? What?
So, you know, for us, and what I see a lot of in WhatsApp chats that I'm in and things getting banded around on LinkedIn is like, let's just get someone in to do the training. Okay.
Yeah.
But you can't just jump into training because you don't know what you're trying to change. And we had to start with this diagnosis. So we ran stakeholder workshops. You know, to build the business case for inclusive hiring, you have to meet the hiring community where they are on this journey. It can't be seen as this kind of internal initiative that you're trying to roll out, because you're going to all immediately hit barriers. Okay, so we need to frame that training or those workshops in workforce realities. Okay, hiring pressures, skill shortages, you know, regional differences, all of that stuff had to be taken into consideration, not these kind of abstract D&I arguments. And alongside that, you know, whilst they were still hiring at pace, the pressure was already still there, we also audited the full recruitment process. And I know that you talk about this a lot when you work with organisations, don't you? In terms of, like, when was the last time you went through your process, your internal process? Let's see what happens. And I think for that, it's really eye-opening, because we understand then from a candidate's perspective what the full journey looks like, what the attraction, assessment, decision making and accessibility can really look like in layman's terms. Again, not this kind of abstract theory, essentially. Yeah. So it really gave us this kind of real shared evidence-based view on where the risks and the opportunities actually sat.
And it sounds like it was almost like a listening first exercise. And that's really, really interesting, rather than going in and kind of educating people on the importance and business benefits and human benefits of inclusive recruitment. Because let's face it, you know, we pretty much, we can send somebody pre-work, can't we, to make sure that they understand the ground rules for everything. But actually really understanding what the lived experience was of the hiring managers and recruitment in the different jurisdictions and areas. I think I really like that listen first approach. How sometimes the word "I'm coming in to audit your end-to-end recruitment process" can be a bit like, oh, what does it have to be? I know my own answer to this, but do you think it has to be that complicated? Or is it a case of, let's just go through your recruitment process as a candidate?
I don't think it is complicated. I think it's a process and a system. And I think if you're there to challenge and improve systems and improve outcomes, not just for underrepresented talent, we're talking about how organizations can attract more talent to their organizations, especially in these kind of, you know, skill shortage areas, which a lot of our clients face, especially in different regions, then I think it's disrupting the system. Okay. And it's understanding, if you're going to look to make improvements or fix something, you've got to see what's broken first. So, you know, an audit and an end-to-end, it sounds pretty dry, but actually this is where the magic happens. Yeah. This is where we can make a tweak here and a tweak there. We can raise awareness here. We can challenge our assumptions here. This is where, you know, this kind of compound interest, this is how you start really kind of moving the dial in this work.
And what were those, with this particular client, what were those key component parts for that audit process?
It's, you know, how you are attracting, how you're assessing talent, how that talent is moving through the recruitment process. What are they faced with when they're faced with an ATS? You know, are there any accessibility challenges there? What happens at the first screen? What does the SLA look like in terms of how you're engaging with the recruitment team? What then happens? You know, how long are you going to have to wait until you speak to someone else? Do you then even hear back if you aren't successful, etc.? So it's really it's a content experience piece. And I know that you've been doing a lot of work, Joe, in terms of candidate experience. You know, this is how you are representing your brand to the market. It needs to be slick. It needs to be engaging. The last thing you want is for candidates to deselect themselves from a process. And what I'm seeing in huge numbers at the moment, because I'm doing loads of coaching for those in the inclusion space, is that individuals just can't even be bothered to apply for jobs. They're like, what's the point? What's the point?
Really good people as well. And it's really absolutely criminal that they're staying put or doing their own thing or using their own network to get contract gigs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the critical piece for us for this particular piece of work, okay, and I think where I see a lot of kind of off-the-shelf training fall short is coaching how recruiters influence hiring managers, okay, when there is a pressure to move quickly and this is how we've always done it. It's so important to empower hiring teams, okay, to give them the language, the confidence to have better conversations without being positioned as blockers or the DEI police, because no one wants that label, trust me.
No, exactly. Yeah, I do think that that is something I've been supporting more and more, is developing TA's capability and its position of influence and helping it to work through everyday scenarios where they may face pushback, or they may want to develop and evolve and strengthen their hiring manager relationships. And, you know, I always find it, what I like to create space for is almost like that internal coaching piece between TA and their, you know, their business area, that really beautiful business partnering that includes upskilling and capability and confidence building. Because 9 times out of 10, a lot of the hiring managers that TA are working with, believe it or not, as we know, recruitment's not their favorite thing to do, because they have the day job to do as well. Right. So what did that look after you'd done all that, you know, the audit work and identified kind of where the low-hanging fruit was and the pain points and whatnot? What was a piece that you introduced that made initially kind of the most difference, or will eventually have longer lasting kind of impact?
I think, and just to go back to the point that you just made there in terms of internal talent teams, I've managed and developed internal talent teams before. The last one that I did, I actually found it quite alarming that they were positioned as this kind of shared service support. And with that label came the assumption that they were there to serve the business. Okay, the business were their client. And it was fascinating that all the really skilled recruiters that worked in that team that I managed had this really subservient, like, kind of vibe about them, in terms of, well, you know, the hiring manager has said this and they've rejected my candidate based on this, and I just need to find more and more and more profiles because the line manager isn't happy. And I'm just like, no, this is not how we approach a partnership. And I think when you use the word their business partner, okay, that is what we're trying to aspire and to achieve here. Because I think the work that we did with this particular in-house team, and obviously we work with hiring managers, hiring communities as well, was that the recruiters were more confident as how they showed up and how they communicated. And because hiring managers had a much clearer structure, the recruitment processes over time became more consistent, okay, and they became more accessible. Everyone knew the role that they played in this system and in this process. And inclusion also started being discussed in terms of decision quality, risk, workforce resilience, okay, not just about whether it was fair or compliant. And I think it stopped becoming, you know, inclusive recruitment. And I wish we could find a new name for it, Joe, if I'm being honest with you. It needs to be called something else, because it stopped becoming this abstract concept that everyone thought it was just the right thing to do, and really started becoming operational. And I think that for me is when we see the organization go through change. So this ownership have shifted, you know, internally too, is stop being seen as this D&I initiative and start being part of how hiring is done around here. And I think that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I talk openly about the shift that I'm seeing. I think that when you put high performing recruitment processes under the banner of diversity and inclusion recruitment, right? Yes. It almost, you can either opt in or opt out. That either interests you or it doesn't. It either makes you feel warm and fuzzy or it makes you check out, right? But actually, and we've said this all along, inclusive, accessible, fair recruitment is not part. It's part of the end result is diversity, and definitely part of your D&I strategy. But it is ultimately high performing recruitment processes that get the job done and improve the candidate experience and open up your opportunity to acquire talented people to keep your business going, right? And what's not to love about that? That's not something you can go, oh, I'm not interested in high performing recruitment processes. That's not for me. I'm thinking about the rebrand of inclusive recruitment. So what was your, I know we're kind of coming to we're trying to keep this towards 30 minutes, 35 minutes, but what would you say has been the kind of the overall impact of the work that you've done with this client so far? I know it's a lot of the stuff that we do. It's hard, isn't it, to just start rattling off all the immediate changes, because this is a change management program. This stuff takes a while, doesn't it? But what feedback has there been? How have you found?
I don't know if it's impact. I think maybe it's kind of more kind of lessons learned or lessons to be learned. I think it's, for me, inclusive recruitment doesn't fail because people don't care. Okay, it fails when systems, skills, and essentially accountability don't line up. So, you know, you need to understand where you are and understand what your driver is. And I'm really hoping business performance is front and center of that. I'm really, really hoping, because, you know, that is, I think, what all businesses need right now, is to really focus on how do we do things better and how do we improve the performance of our business, because we need, even for wider economy, we need businesses, especially within the UK, to succeed. Okay. And this is, for me, the biggest commercial lever that you could use, you know, embedding inclusion and equity across your processes, whether it be recruitment or not. So I think, yeah, for me, it's more of the lesson learned. The impact is there and it will continue to be there, because the hiring didn't slow down. Okay, everyone got upskilled, you know, accountability was embedded within the organization, and the outcomes speak for themselves in terms of attraction and retention of your best talent.
Yeah. And a lot of this stuff is super, super measurable, isn't it? If you've got the mechanisms in place, you know, your candidate feedback, your, what are they called? The, is it NPS now? What's the?
It's NPS.
NPS score, Net Promoter Scores. A lot of my clients, I always ask them at the beginning is, do you measure those? And it's like, great, because that for me is like an anchor point. That's what we can use to then see whether or not we can get those scores higher. Or any part of talent attraction and acquisition and bringing new people on board is all directly linked to business performance. So when you start to see, you know, your retention rates getting better, your onboarding processes improved, your rejected candidate feedback improving, your hired candidate feedback improving, hiring managers feeding back about their experience of your TA team, all of that stuff. You know, it's all, it can all be evidenced. It's whether or not you're prepared to put in the shift and to also track it and attach some kind of measurement structure around it.
And I think, you know, audits can feel overwhelming. Sometimes you don't want to know what's going to come out of them. You know, everyone likes to think they're doing an amazing job in this space, right? You know, and especially because it's been a concept that's been around for so long, we all think we want to be doing really well with it. But if you don't kind of do this audit, you end up fixing the wrong things, okay? Or you place too much responsibility on different parts of the recruitment process, whether that be recruiters, whether that be hiring communities, without being able to give them the authority or the structure to really kind of influence the outcomes. So I think it is important to, you know, sometimes just take a step back and go, what is it that we're trying to solve here? And how can we link this to our core business objectives in order for getting as, you know, to get as much engagement and accountability.
Yeah, love it. And in an ideal world, you know, if I was Prime Minister for a moment, probably not the Prime Minister, but I would absolutely love for every single one of my prospects and every single one of my clients to agree to an audit before we started training. because I think sometimes we can assume the problems, the challenges. We can, like, you know, we don't always know what's bubbling underneath the surface as somebody external to a business. And the solution that we come in at is so we do our very best to diagnose and write out the correct prescription to make our clients healthier. You know, we're still going on the perspective of our key stakeholder, and I think that you know, audits, light audits, deep dive audits, they're just such a brilliant starting point. It's kind of like you're making sure you fully diagnose the challenge and the area that needs improving before you're going in with solutions. And I think that they don't have to be scary, laborious things that end up in a 65-page document, never to be shared or used again. They can be something as basic as going through your own hiring process, and just looking at how everything's connected in and where the challenges are, and bringing other people into the conversation. So I think it's something that you do particularly well. I'm very good at going in and going, right, we've identified a pain point in training and learning and development, and that's my, you know, that's what I love. But I think really getting under the bonnet, especially of these larger organizations, that's right up your street, and it's been really interesting. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I have too. What an amazing way to start the new year. I feel so pumped about this year. I'm so excited about it. We're just about to kick off work with another organization who, by their own admission, have got really outdated recruitment processes, like really outdated. You know, they haven't got an ATS, they haven't got a careers site. They really are starting from scratch, but the pressure that the hiring numbers that they've got are putting on the rest of the business. I'm so excited about kind of going in and to redesign this for them, because I just know instantly what an impact it's going to have, just in terms of like time for their hiring community. I feel like I'm about to give them a gift, you know? So, do you know, and that's exactly how I feel about the work. You know, I think it's really important that you partner with people who, number one, obsess about this stuff and get really, really excited about it, and actually want to come in and make a difference to your organization, because they can see what this looks like fixed. And that's where my brain always goes, like, how do we fix this and how are we going to get from A to B? So yeah, really excited to continue this work. I'm excited to continue collaborating with you this year, Jo, because I'm sure we're going to bring some of our joint case studies up as with this series continues to develop and evolve. But yeah, I've loved it. So thanks for your time.
No worries. Thank you so much. And I need to choose who I'm going to be, what I'm going to be focusing in on, and the stories that I'm going to tell the next time. It's over to me, and you're the one that's giving me the grilling.
And trust me, my love, I will grill you. You know I am. So brilliant. Thank you for everyone. Anyone's got any questions, chat, you know, you can always chat to us in our DMs. But yeah, we'll see you next month with a bit of more.
Bye-bye.
Bye.